Day 1. You wake up, curtains closed, and honestly? Nothing feels different. Not yet. You go to work, you come home, maybe you catch a screen's worth of blue light, but not a single direct ray of actual sunlight touches your skin. No big deal, right? I'm going to show you exactly what your body does over the next 7 days without it. And I promise you, the order these changes happen in is not what you'd guess. Day 1, nothing. That's the truth. Your body runs on stored resources and momentum, and one day without sun barely registers. But something invisible already shifted, and it happened almost immediately. Here's the part nobody explains well. Your body doesn't actually run on a 24-hour clock by default. Left completely alone, your internal clock drifts to something closer to 24 hours and 15 minutes. Bright light, especially morning light, is what resets it back to exactly 24 every single day. In 2017, 3 researchers named Jeffrey Hall, Michael Rosbash, and Michael Young won the Nobel Prize for figuring out how this actually works at a molecular level. They found a gene, nicknamed period, that builds up a protein overnight and breaks it back down during the day, like a tiny internal hourglass that resets itself every time light hits your eyes. Miss that reset, even once, and the hourglass just keeps running a little long. Day 2. You probably don't notice anything yet. But that 15-minute drift from day 1 is still sitting there, unresected, and it's about to have company. Here's the thing about a clock that runs 15 minutes long every single day: it doesn't reset itself. It just keeps stacking. Miss the light reset on day 2 as well, and now you're carrying half an hour of drift instead of 15 minutes. This is exactly the compounding pattern Hall and Rosbash tracked in their fruit flies. The period gene's protein builds up a little more each night it isn't properly reset, and the whole cycle slowly slides later and later. Day 3 is where it starts showing up. Falling asleep feels a little harder. Waking up feels a little foggier. Nothing dramatic, more like a mild, low-grade jet lag with no plane involved. That's your circadian clock, quietly drifting further from the actual 24-hour day, exactly the mechanism Hall, Rosbash, and Young mapped out in fruit flies decades before anyone connected it to something as simple as a week spent indoors. Now here's a question worth asking. If your sleep clock is already sliding by day 3, what's happening to your mood? This is where the story gets more interesting than "you're just a little tired." Back in 1984, a psychiatrist named Norman Rosenthal, working at the National Institute of Mental Health, became the first person to formally describe something he called seasonal affective disorder. He'd moved from sunny South Africa to a much darker American winter, and he started tracking how his own mood and energy tracked almost exactly with how much daylight he was getting. Through controlled studies, he and his team showed that reduced light exposure could measurably shift mood and energy in a specific, predictable window, and that bright light exposure could reverse it, sometimes within days. His original research looked at whole seasons, but the mechanism he uncovered doesn't care whether the darkness comes from winter or from you personally deciding to stay indoors for a week. Your brain doesn't know the difference. It's just measuring photons hitting your retina day after day and adjusting accordingly. Day 4, and that mechanism starts to show up as something closer to flatness. Not sadness exactly. More like the color getting turned down slightly on everything. Day 5, your energy in the afternoon starts dipping harder than usual, and you might notice you're reaching for caffeine, or a screen, or something, anything, to compensate for a lift that used to come from somewhere else. Now here's the twist, and it's the part almost every video on this topic gets completely backwards. You'd assume that after a week with zero sunlight, your vitamin D levels have cratered. They haven't, not really, and this is where a scientist named Michael Holick becomes relevant. Holick has spent decades at Boston University mapping out exactly how your skin makes vitamin D from sunlight, tracing the whole chemical pathway from a molecule called 7-dehydrocholesterol sitting in your skin, through a UVB-triggered transformation, into the vitamin D your body actually uses. His research is also very clear on something people misunderstand: circulating vitamin D in your blood has a half-life measured in weeks, not days. A single week without sun barely dents it if your levels were reasonable to begin with. The dramatic vitamin D headlines are usually about months of deprivation, not 7 days. Your body actually builds vitamin D reserves specifically so a cloudy stretch, or a week spent indoors, doesn't leave you defenseless, that slow chemistry is a feature, not an oversight. So if it's not the vitamin D crashing, what's actually driving everything you felt this week? It's the fast system, not the slow one. Vitamin D synthesis is slow chemistry, built to buffer you through weeks or months. Your circadian clock and your mood-regulating light pathways are fast systems, built to respond to a single day's light exposure, sometimes even a single missed morning. That's exactly why the sleep drift and the mood flatness showed up within days, while the vitamin D barely moved at all. Two completely different timelines, running underneath the same missing ingredient. Day 6, 7. By the end of the week, most people report the same pattern. Sleep timing has shifted noticeably, energy feels blunted in a way that's hard to pin down, and getting back outside for even 20 minutes produces a surprisingly immediate lift, faster than you'd expect if it were really about vitamin D synthesis kicking back in. That immediate lift is actually the clue. Vitamin D synthesis takes hours of skin exposure to even begin meaningfully. But your circadian and mood pathways respond to light hitting your eyes within minutes. If you feel better almost instantly after stepping outside, that's Hall and Rosbach's clock genes and Rosenthal's light-sensitive mood pathways doing their job in real time, not your vitamin D stores refilling. Here's where this connects back to something bigger than a one-week experiment. Remote workers, night shift workers, people going through a stretch of short winter days, anyone whose life happens to keep them indoors for stretches at a time, is quietly running this same experiment, on repeat, sometimes for months. The mechanism doesn't need you to intend it. It just needs the light to be missing. Shift workers in particular deal with a nastier version of this, not just missing daylight, but often getting bright light exposure at exactly the wrong time, which can push that internal clock in the opposite direction from where their work schedule actually needs it to be. Some hospitals and workplaces have started installing bright light banks specifically to fight this, a direct, practical descendant of Rosenthal's original light therapy research from the 1980s. Everyone's baseline light sensitivity is different, which is actually something Rosenthal documented directly. Some people can go a week with barely a ripple. Others notice the drift by day 2. This isn't a plan telling you exactly how much sunlight to get or a substitute for medical advice if you're dealing with a real mood disorder. If what you're feeling goes beyond a mild dip, that's worth an actual conversation with a doctor, not a home experiment. But if you're just curious what a week indoors actually does, now you know the real shape of it. The clock drifts first, fast and quiet. The mood follows a day or two behind it. And the vitamin D, the thing everyone assumes is the whole story, barely moves at all. Day 1. You wake up, curtains closed, and nothing feels different. Except now you know exactly what already started. A bunch of you have asked some version of the same question in the comments on videos like this one. Does sitting near a sunny window count? Short answer, only partly. Window glass blocks almost all of the UVB wavelength your skin needs to actually make vitamin D, so Hollick's research says that pathway stays basically shut off no matter how sunny the room looks. But the circadian reset from Hall and Rosbach's system responds more to overall brightness hitting your eyes, and that part does work reasonably well through glass, just less strongly than the real outdoors. So a sunny window helps your clock stay on schedule. It does almost nothing for your vitamin D. Two different systems, two very different answers to what sounds like one simple question.